In the PHP module for this week, you will notice, I believe it's the chapter 4 material, but that's immaterial. You'll know exactly the portion of it. There is an included series of exercises that I am going to have you guys do on arrays. Now, like I mentioned in a previous video, I know some of you have had, I'm going to call it stand-up programming, you know, C++ or Java or something else where you will have seen an array, and potentially maybe some of you have not had array operations. I've gone through the video here like 3 times trying to determine if it's appropriate for a beginner when it comes to an array structure, and I think it is. But just in case, I want to do 2 things with this video. Number 1, kind of define what an array is, just as a refresher for everybody or as an introduction for others, and speak to the nature of data the way we would use it, not just here in web development, but really as a science, so data sciences in general. So first and foremost, what is an array? Technically speaking, an array is a collection of homogenized data elements. So what does that really mean? It means it's a collection of the same kind of stuff that we put together. So if we're looking at addresses, everybody's address is, roughly speaking, the same, right? So we would have house number, we would have city, we would have zip code, we would have state, and we would have street name, right? So everybody's street name would go together as a collection. So instead of having individual variables for your street name, your city, your zip code, and then what do I have to do when I get another user? Now I have to start a new batch of variables. This is problematic because how are you going to name those in the long run? How are you going to keep those straight in the long run? How are you going to develop code that you can use from user to user to user to user that is repeatable in a way that actually makes sense as far as the code goes? And the answer is you can't. Whereas an array gives you one way to refer to a whole host of data that's all the same. So city, 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 and everybody's data is read into there. And then when I take another array that is all zip code, 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 and everybody's data is read into there. Now what I know is if you are the 3rd user, I will take the 3rd city, the 3rd zip code, the 3rd house number, the 3rd street name, and now I have your address. If you're number 5, great, I'll take the 5th one. 5th city, 5th zip, 5th address, 5th street name, and away we go. That is how we can use large chunks of data, and we can use them in a way that is, you know, sensible, as opposed to having to figure out, and frankly there is no great way, an impossible structure for how to deal with and manage thousands, tens of thousands, millions of names. It's impossible, and if we extrapolate out from just names or addresses, it's even more impossible. The reason we use arrays in data science, which means here in web design, but really it can mean in any one of a host of different kinds of environments, is an array is a temporary data structure. So we read from files, we read from databases, and we populate arrays. So if today I want to find out what my sales numbers are, today is going to change. Yesterday was today when yesterday was today, but today is today, and tomorrow today will be yesterday. I know that's a shitty example, but honestly it's the truth, right? That is a time-dependent idea of what today is. So what an array allows me to do is say, fine, this shit is all temporary. So give me the numbers now, and tomorrow I'll just rerun this same query to get me a new set of data. And that's the benefit of reading stuff into an array, is that It just goes away later when we reload the page. So if you think about things like Facebook, if you think about a timeline, so we have images in that timeline. That timeline is only good at the moment you make that request, right? Because later, if you make that request again, there may be more images, more posts, more content in that timeline. So that's how we would get that read to you. Now, with Facebook, it's true that is partially done with databases, that is partially done with arrays, and that is partially done with PHP and actually with JavaScript as well. But if you kind of take a step back and squint at it a little bit, that holds out to be true. So when we read in a previous video here, I mentioned the employee directory at Rock Valley College. When we read today's employee into that web page, really what we're doing is we're getting a temporary list of employees to paint that particular page with PHP. And the way we would do that is with an array. So an array, again, is a homogenized collection. So they all are the same. So all the elements read into this array are names. All the elements read into this array are birth dates, what have you. And what that gives us is a very flexible, very fast, very temporary data structure that when we're done, we can blow them away, and when we need them again, we can repopulate them again. All of data science works, if you squint at it, this way. Now, is it true there are other kinds of data structures we can use? Yes, there's something called a vector, which is an array that can be differently sized, but what I'll tell you is arrays are preferable because their rigid structure, and this is something you can worry about in another day, because their rigid structure means that we can be faster. So an array really is the preferred data structure for these big data operations, and everything you'll do is going to, even here, you're going to look more and more and more towards these big data operations. So here in PHP, it is not PHP for web designers. It is single serving PHP exercises. You will have an opportunity to see what you can do with data and an array, even if you haven't really used arrays as structures before.